Okay, let's unpack this. You've shared with us a fascinating document today. International Standard on Auditing 550.
That's the one, ISA 550.
Now, I have to admit, on the surface, auditors' responsibilities concerning related parties maybe doesn't sound like the most thrilling topic.
I get that. It sounds a bit dry, perhaps.
But stick with us, folks, because understanding what's in here, it can be really revealing. It shows how financial statements get checked and, maybe more importantly, where risks might be hiding.
Absolutely.
So our mission, really, in this deep dive is to pull out the key bits from ISA 550, show you what auditors look for and why it matters for trusting financial info.
And we do have the full text, the intro, objectives, definitions, all the requirements, and the application guidance, too.
So the whole package.
Yeah, it's pretty comprehensive. It shows how auditors handle these sometimes tricky related party relationships and deals. Think of it like a peek behind the financial oversight curtain.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The standard actually says, look, these related party deals, they're normal. They happen all the time in business.
A standard part of business.
But, and this is the key part, because there's potential for influence, influence that wouldn't be there in a regular arm's length deal.
Right. Between totally independent parties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they inherently carry a higher risk, a risk of what the standard calls material misstatement in the financials. Big enough errors to change decisions.
And that risk can come from different places. Maybe management bias, maybe not disclosing enough.
Or worse.
Or, yeah, in some cases, even fraud.
Okay. So what does this mean for someone listening?
Well, whether you're, say, checking a company's financial health, maybe before investing.
Or preparing for a business deal.
Yeah, or getting ready for a negotiation where the other side might have, complex relationships. Or even if you're just curious about finance stuff.
Yeah.
Knowing how auditors look at related parties gives you a much sharper perspective. We're going to flag the key areas auditors focus on, the questions they ask, the potential red flags.
Okay, great. So let's start at the beginning. Defining related parties. It's wider than just like immediate family, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The standard is very specific and deliberately broad. It wants to catch all sorts of relationships where influence might exist.
Like what, for instance?
Well, it starts with control. So any entity that controls the company being audited or is controlled by it or is under common control.
So parents, subsidiaries, sister companies, that kind of corporate family tree.
Exactly. That's the classic structure. But like you said, it goes further.
Okay.
It also includes an associate. That's a company where the investor has significant influence, but maybe not outright control.
Ah, okay. Significant influence.
Then there are joint ventures where the audited entity is a participant.
Yeah.
And crucially, it brings in people. Yeah, management. Specifically, key management personnel of the entity or its parent, the top brass.
The decision makers.
Right.
And you mentioned it gets even more personal.
It does. It includes close family members of those key managers.
Okay, so spouses, children potentially.
And then it kind of loops back. It also includes any entity that's controlled or jointly controlled or significantly influenced by those key managers or their close family.
Wow, okay. That's quite a net they're casting there.
It really is.
So the common thread through all of that is this idea of potential influence, right? One party being able to sway another, maybe away from typical market terms.
Precisely. That's the core concept. Think about it like a potential imbalance of power in a transaction. Could one side push for terms that aren't quite fair market value?
Because they're connected somehow.
Exactly. And that potential deviation from normal market forces, that's what creates the higher risk auditors need to focus on. It's why the definition is so broad to catch situations that might look okay on the surface, but aren't.
Like selling an asset to a company secretly owned by the CEO's brother-in-law at a weird price.
That's a perfect example. That's a related party transaction that needs scrutiny.
Okay, that makes the broad definition make a lot more sense. So knowing who these parties are, what are the auditor's main responsibilities then, according to ISA 550?
Well, the main goal, the core objective, is for the auditor to get enough good evidence, what we call sufficient appropriate audit evidence.
Evidence about what, specifically?
About identifying all these related parties, making sure their relationships are disclosed, understanding the transactions between them, and ultimately deciding if those transactions were accounted for correctly and disclosed properly, following the right accounting rules.
Sounds like it involves a fair bit of detective work, looking for connections, potential issues.
It definitely can. And a huge part of that is the auditor's mindset.
You mean being skeptical?
Exactly. Professional skepticism. Auditors need it throughout the audit, but it's especially vital with related parties because of those inherent risks we mentioned.
The risk of hidden influence, things not being arm's length.
Right. So they can't just accept what management tells them without question. They need a questioning mind, need to challenge assumptions, look for inconsistencies. It's not about assuming fraud, but being alert to the possibility that things aren't what they seem.
Got it. A healthy dose of skepticism is built in.
Hmm.
So how do they actually start identifying these risks and finding these related parties? What's the process?
They have to perform specific risk assessment procedures. The goal is to find, assess, and then figure out how to respond to the risks of material misstatement coming from these relationships and transactions.
Okay, and how does that usually begin?
It typically starts with the auditor trying to get a really good grasp of the company's whole network of related parties and the kinds of deals they do together.
But companies don't always just hand over a list, right?
Not always straightforward, no.
Yeah.
So a key first step is asking questions, inquiring with management and maybe others in the company who'd know.
Direct questions about relationships and transactions.
Yes. And there's also an internal step for the audit team itself. They're required to actually discuss among themselves how vulnerable the company's financials might be to errors or fraud because of these related party dealings.
Like a brainstorming session for risks.
Kind of, yeah. It brings different perspectives from the team together to think about potential weak spots.
So it's questioning, understanding the business, internal discussion. After that risk assessment, what kind of specific actions or procedures do they take?
Well, the standard lists several. A big one is inspecting records, looking for clues about relationships or transactions that maybe management didn't mention.
What kind of records are we talking about?
Things like minutes from board meetings or key committee meetings, looking at contracts the company signed, and of course, digging into the accounting records themselves.
Really getting into the details, the paper trail. What if they find something management didn't disclose, like an unexpected relationship or a big transaction?
Good question. If they find something previously unidentified or undisclosed, they have to tell the rest of the audit team right away.
Ah, so everyone's aware immediately.
Yes, it ensures everyone knows about this new piece of information and can think about how it affects their part of the audit. It might mean they need to do more work or rethink earlier conclusions.
Communication is key then.
Ye-
What else besides digging through records?
They also talk directly to management and those charged with governance, like the board or audit committee.
Asking them what they know.
Yeah, asking about their understanding of the relationships, how they're managed, what transactions have happened. They also look at any lists the company does provide of its related parties and judge if that list seems complete.
So comparing what the company says versus what they find elsewhere.
Exactly. And it's not just formal lists. Auditors need to stay alert whenever they're looking at any document. Could be a small agreement, an internal memo, for anything that hints at undisclosed related parties or deals.
Keeping their eyes open for subtle clues.
Right. And sometimes they might even try to confirm things directly with the other party involved.
Go straight to the related party.
If it makes sense and is practical, yes. They might try to confirm the terms of significant transactions directly with the related party. It's another way to verify the information the company provided.
Okay. So they identify the parties, they understand the transactions, they confirm details, but the job's not done yet, is it? They have to look at the financials themselves.
That's the crucial next step. They have to evaluate, have these relationships and transactions been accounted for correctly? And just as vital, have they been disclosed properly in the financial statements?
Meaning, is there enough information for someone reading the statements to understand what's going on?
Precisely. People need to understand the nature of the relationship and the business reason for the transaction. Otherwise, it might look odd or confusing.
And what if a deal clearly wasn't done at, say, normal market rates? Like that example of selling an asset cheap to a relative.
If a transaction wasn't done on terms equivalent to an arm's length deal, the auditor has to really consider if that impacts the overall fairness of the financial statements.
Could it be misleading?
Potentially, yes. It might mean the reported numbers don't reflect what would have happened in a normal market situation.
That seems pretty significant. Do auditors get management to formally sign off on any of this?
Yes, they do. They're required to get written representations, formal statements from management, and sometimes from the board or audit committee, too.
What do these statements say?
Management confirms in writing that they've told the auditor about all the related parties and transactions they know of, and they also confirm that everything's been accounted for and disclosed according to the rules.
So it's a formal acknowledgement from the top. And if auditors do find significant problems related to these parties during the audit, who do they tell?
They have to communicate any significant issues directly to those charged with governance. The board, the audit committee, whoever has oversight, they need to know about any major findings or concerns.
Makes sense. And finally, given how complex this can be, documentation must be super important. Right.
Absolutely critical. The audit files, the documentation, must clearly show who the identified related parties were, the nature of those relationships, and details about the transactions they looked at.
A clear record of everything.
Yes, it's the evidence of the work done and why they reached their conclusions.
So, when you pull it all together, this standard ISA 550, it seems technical, but it's actually a really crucial piece for ensuring transparency and, well, trust in financial reports.
It really is. It highlights why auditors have to look beyond just the surface numbers and understand that whole web of relationships that can influence a company's finances.
And here's maybe something interesting for listeners to think about. Consider companies you know or organizations you deal with.
Huh.
Who are their key players? Who are the major shareholders, the executives? Who might have the power to influence decisions or big deals?
Right. Thinking about those potential influence points.
Yeah. This whole framework we've discussed, it gives you a lens to look at those relationships and think about their potential impact, even just as an outsider.
That's a great way to put it, applying that critical thinking.
So wrapping up, what's the big takeaway? Hopefully this dive into ISA 550 gives a clearer picture of how auditors tackle this complex world of related parties.
It's methodical.
It is, and it's a reminder, isn't it, that while these transactions are common, the scrutiny they get is absolutely vital for keeping financial information reliable.
Couldn't agree more. That scrutiny is essential.
Okay, so finally, maybe a provocative thought to leave everyone with.
Go for it.
In today's world, with global business, really complex company structures, tangled relationships across borders, how might the challenges of just finding and auditing these related party deals keep changing?
That's a really good question. It's constantly evolving.
It really underscores why standards like ISA 550 are so important and why they probably need to keep evolving too, right?
Absolutely. It's an ongoing challenge for the profession.